This morning we're going to talk about discipline in the church. Everything that I have read as I've studied this and prepared for this has called it the forgotten doctrine of the 21st century. Something that just doesn't seem to happen in churches anymore. And if it does happen, it's very rare, that would be a good thing if there weren't so many problems and issues and sin within the church. But it's been forgotten. There's no good reason for it, but the church as a whole has turned a blind eye to the sins of the members. The reason for that is because every time we turn around, we have "do not judge" thrown in our face. Do not judge. Do not judge. We've heard that scripture. Jesus said that, but every time it's thrown in our face, it's thrown out of context. But we hear it all the time. But we are given biblical instruction on how we are to go through the process of church discipline. And since there's biblical instructions, this is a discipline, this is a doctrine that cannot be and should not be ignored. There's an old African proverb that says, when bull elephants fight, the grass always loses. Imagine yourself the grass under two bull elephants, you're going to lose. And it's the same way in the church. When members of the church fight, or when there's a member of the church that's lost in sin, the whole church loses. Every time you turn on the news and somebody that's affiliated with the church in one way or another falls and commits a sin, or is living a sinful lifestyle that's discovered, guess what? The whole church is blamed for it. So when one person messes up and makes a mistake and falls into sin, the whole church takes the blame. A lot of that is because when these problems become known to another member of the church, they're not dealt with. They're allowed to continue to linger and continue to go on and go on and go on and go on. So what about this whole do not judge thing when it comes to the church? Well, Paul told us, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 12, what business is it of mine to judge those outside of the church? Then he goes on to say, are you not to judge those inside? So what this means to us is that no, we're not to judge those that are outside the church for the life that they're living. People are lost. They're sinners. We should expect them to sin. Right? We should expect them to live in sin. What we're supposed to do is we're supposed to share the good news of Jesus Christ with them. We're supposed to love them and allow God to change their hearts and to change their minds and to change their lives. However, when it comes to those in the church, those that claim to know Christ as their Savior, when they fall into sin, they're to be confronted and disciplined. As we'll talk about today, Jesus gave us instructions about how to do that. How we're supposed to do that. Now, someone once wrote, says, a computer virus on the loose is a computer user's worst nightmare. A virus can destroy everything in the computer. According to S&S Software International and writer James Cope, this is how a computer virus works. Computer virus is a software, a piece of programming code whose purpose is to replicate. Many viruses enter the computer via floppy disk or are downloaded from another source. Once the computer is infected, the virus checks each time a program is opened to see if that program is clean. If it is, the virus copies itself onto that program. Because viruses need time to spread undetected, most will not affect the proper functioning of the computer right away. But eventually their destructive power is felt as files are erased and corrupted. Just as a computer virus spread through the virus of the computer, so sin can spread in the church. But the good news is Jesus gives us instructions on how we are to prevent that and to stop that from happening. In the book of Matthew, chapter 18, starting in verse 15, it says, "If your brother sins against you, go and show him your fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you've won your brother over." Now this is where a lot of people in the church get in trouble. Because we like to skip this step. One-on-one confrontation is not fun. It is not exciting. It is not something that we are to enjoy. So we skip it. We start going to everybody else with our problems. A lot of times, what we're thinking is sin is just somebody angered us, or they offended us. They did something that we didn't particularly like. So instead of going to that person and having that one-on-one conversation and working it out, we go and tell everybody else. Well, this isn't church discipline when we do it that way. That's actually called gossip. And I'll tell you this morning, Jesus doesn't like it. I don't like it. And you shouldn't like it either. Gossip can destroy a church from the inside. And there's nothing that Satan likes more than a church that's destroyed from the inside out. But, unfortunately, it happens way too often in the church. So instead of doing that, Jesus says if we have a problem with somebody, if somebody has sinned, or they have offended us, or they have angered us, or they have upset us, or they have stepped on our toes, or they have pushed me out of my comfort zone, Jesus said, you go and talk to them one-on-one, person to person. This is what we called in school, we called it man-to-man. There is no getting everybody else involved at this point. And when we obey Christ in doing this, a lot of the problems that we have will be dealt with. A lot of times when we approach somebody one-on-one and say, hey, look, I heard you gossiping the other day, and that's not a good thing to do. A lot of times they may not even realize that that's what they did. So, problem solved. They apologize and you move on. And Jesus says if he listens, you've won them over. Colossians chapter 3 verse 13 says, bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. So when we find ourselves in these situations, let's not forget that we all make mistakes. And if you think you don't make mistakes, then you and I need to have a one-on-one conversation. Because the Bible tells us that we all sin and fall short of the glory of God. But since we all make mistakes, we all sin, we're to forgive each other. So part of the process when it comes to church discipline is forgiveness. It's going one-on-one. And when they apologize, you accept their apology and you move on. That's the end of the story. However, if sin continues, whatever it is, then we deal with it, continue to deal with it, but no matter what step we take, no matter what step we're in, that does not remove the need to offer forgiveness. Because through the sacrifice of Christ, God forgave us more than we could ever forgive each other. He forgave us more than we could ever forgive each other. We hurt Him more than we could ever hurt each other. But God forgave us. And when we go to somebody one-on-one, we need to remember that. We need to be willing to accept an apology. We need to be willing to hear their side of the story. We need to be willing to forgive and forget. It's simple that a one-on-one conversation can solve a lot of the problems in the church. But for some reason, we don't want to have those one-on-one conversations. A one-on-one conversation can deal with a lot of sin in the church. But we don't want to have those one-on-one conversations. But the first step, Jesus tells us, is we need to go to them one-on-one. Person to person. And we need to do it in love. We don't come at them angry. We don't come at them with a bad attitude. We come at them one-on-one in love with the purpose of reconciliation. If that works, that's great. But what if it doesn't? What if they want to continue doing what they're doing, continue living in sin? Well, Jesus continues to tell us what to do. Matthew 18:16 says, "But if you will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses." Now, Jesus didn't just come up with this. Now, being Jesus, if He would have, it would have been okay. Wouldn't have been a problem with this, but Jesus took some words from the Old Testament. He went all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15. It says, "One witness is not enough to convince a man accused, or convict a man accused of any crime or offense that he has committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses." This command was given so that somebody wasn't falsely accused. 2 or 3 witnesses can be enough to convict someone of wrongdoing, but one wasn't enough because it just might be a false charge. So Jesus took the words of Moses and He applied it to the church discipline because it just might be a false charge. So if we first go to someone one-on-one and they don't listen, we are to take 1 or 2 more people as witnesses. Now, I know there's a retired math teacher in the house, but to me, 1 to 2 witnesses means 1 to 2 witnesses, not a van load of people. Not the entire church board, not the entire congregation, not all your buddies, not all your friends. 1 to 2 witnesses means just that. 1 to 2 witnesses. Again, this step is often skipped because we don't like it. Everyone always wants to run off to the church board. They can solve everything. Or they run off to other members. They don't even confront one-on-one. They're not even worried about taking witnesses with them. But if they do take witnesses with them, they don't want witnesses. They want people on their side. They pick their friends to go. The sad thing about this is many times they have corrupted, as like a computer virus, the listening ability of their witnesses. They've already been in their ear. They've already been gossiping about how bad this person is and how evil they are. So their witnesses are corrupted. That can be a problem. Another reason that Jesus said that we're to take 1 to 2 witnesses along with us is because in a case like this, what if we're the ones in the wrong? What if we misunderstood what that person did or what they said? What if we got some false information? What if we decided to skip step one and we go to them with our witnesses and they're sitting there like, this is the first I've heard of this. Where did this come from? You know, we know that they're supposed to come to us one-on-one, and here they are, they got 3 people sitting across the table from us. Where did this come from? Taking 1 to 2 witnesses with us will hopefully give us an objective point of view. We might find that what they did, what they said, that offended us, that angered us, that made us think that they were falling into sin, may not have been a reason to get so upset in the first place. But if they are in the wrong, they didn't listen to you one-on-one, 1 to 2 witnesses can help them understand just how serious their sin is. Can help them to see that maybe they do need to seek forgiveness. Maybe they are in the wrong. They need to seek forgiveness. Also, if we end up having to go to the next step that we're going to talk about in a minute, having 1 to 2 witnesses can help solidify our case. Maybe these witnesses have witnessed the same type of behavior. They just haven't thought about bringing it to that person's attention. But we must remember that no matter how many we take with us, no more than 1 or 2, it must be done in love. Again, we cannot go to them in anger. We cannot go to them with a closed mind. We cannot go to them with a bad attitude, with an accusing attitude. We have to go in love. We need to go into the meeting with our witnesses offering forgiveness. We need to go into our meeting with our witnesses offering reconciliation. We need to go into the meeting with our witnesses with the mindset of bearing with each other and forgiving each other as God has forgiven us in love. We must even go into our meetings with our witnesses with the mindset that we just might be wrong. And the reason they didn't listen to us one-on-one was because they weren't doing anything wrong in the first place. Now, of course, if we know that it's sin and we know that it's blatant sin, we don't have to worry about that. But a lot of times we might find ourselves on the wrong end of the argument. 1 to 2 witnesses can hopefully help us to work the problem out. Help them to see their sin and to turn. Hopefully that works, but what if they don't? Matthew 18:17, Jesus says, if he refuses to listen to them, then tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. So, you went to him one-on-one. That didn't work. You took 1 to 2 witnesses with you, and that didn't work. Jesus said the next step now is, now you take them before the church. Now you can go to the church board, which is where we need to start, because the church board are the spiritual leaders of the church, and it's their responsibility to deal with issues like this. Church board, once somebody's before the church board, hopefully they realize how serious their sin is, and they decide to change. They decide to reach out for that reconciliation and that forgiveness. And when I was thinking about this, the only good example that I could come up with on this situation is take a kid in school. Nowadays, we've got a lot of kids in school that have behavioral issues. for one reason or the other. And so one student tries to help the other student see the error of their ways. They go to them one-on-one. That doesn't work, so most logical students will get a teacher involved. So now they got a witness. That doesn't work, so now they go before the board, which in our case was the principal's office. And when you got sent to the principal's office, you were in trouble. So if somebody has to get to the point to where they're not listening and they have to go before the church board and explain themselves, they're in trouble. Hopefully at this point, they realize how disruptive their sin is and they stop it and they repent. But if they don't, now it's the church board's responsibility to take them before the entire church. So now it's like the student that wouldn't even listen to the principal, and now he's had to go and stand before the school board with his parents and everybody around. And they either get it together or they get kicked out of school. Jesus says the same way with the church. If it reaches the point to where they're having to stand up in front of the church to deal with their sins, they either get it straightened out or they get kicked out. They're excommunicated from the church. Now remember, all these steps are done with the purpose of reconciliation. So hopefully if a situation reaches that point, it's an eye-opener. It's the eye-opener that's needed. We also must remember that they're not excommunicated forever. If they come to realize how serious their sin is and they come seeking forgiveness and seeking reconciliation, it's to be given to them. And they're to be welcomed back in with open arms. They're not to be told, well, sorry, can't come back. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus says, love them. Let them back. Forgive them. If it reaches this point, hopefully it's what it takes to get them back on track. Hopefully it doesn't ever reach this point. I can't remember any instances in my lifetime where I've known a church to reach this point. I've known where it's made it all the way up to the church board, but I've never been where somebody has been taken before the entire church. No matter what step we go on, no matter what step we take, we find that we're not doing this alone. We're not doing this by ourselves. Jesus is right there with us. And since these instructions came from him, it would seem obvious, but Jesus wanted to make it very, very clear to us that he is with us. Continuing on in Matthew 18, verse 18, it says, "But I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." It says we follow Jesus' commands for church discipline. We don't skip any of the steps. We go one-on-one. We take witnesses. We go to the board. We take them before the church. We're going to be following the will of God. And our discipline is going to be upheld in God's eyes. We'll use church discipline as Jesus instructed. Our decision is upheld in heaven. It's supported in heaven and on earth. Continuing on in verses 19 through 20, it says, "Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where there are 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them." Now, I'm about to stir some controversy. I'm about to step on some toes, including my own. Because I'm guilty of this too. These are the most misunderstood and misused scriptures in the church outside of "do not judge" and "money is the root of all evil," which we all know is not the right of those, but that's how they're used in the church. these scriptures, these words of Christ, are in direct contact with church discipline. We apply them to our prayer circles. Not that I'm saying that there's anything wrong with this, but that's not what Jesus intended when He said this. Because nowhere in Scripture are we told that the prayers of one person are downplayed or ignored by God. As a matter of fact, Jesus often went off by Himself to pray. And His prayers were heard. There are other times that we read throughout Scripture where somebody went off by themselves to pray. God didn't ignore their prayers. Their prayers were just as powerful. In the book of James, we're told to have the elders of the church lay hands on and pray for the sick as a group. So while coming together under the name of Christ is not a bad thing, that's not what Jesus was saying in these scriptures. Jesus was talking directly about church discipline. If we practice church discipline as He instructed, Jesus said that our prayer for the other person will be answered. It may take all the way getting to the point of kicking them out of the church, removing them from the fellowship to get their attention, but if we continue to pray for them, we're eventually going to get their attention. And the discipline is going to be accepted in heaven. He said that when we follow church discipline as He instructed, He is with us as we go through the process. He's guiding us, He's helping us, and He's comforting us as we go through the difficulties of church discipline. So we need to remember to keep these scriptures in context with the other, because church discipline is very tough. We don't want to find ourselves doing it wrong. We don't want to find ourselves not having Jesus' support when we have to go through church discipline. But even though it's tough, it's necessary when a believer in Christ falls into sin. Hopefully and prayerfully it doesn't reach the point of removing him from the fellowship. But if it does, Jesus said to do it. If done properly, many times the situation is worked out with a one-on-one conversation. Done in love. Got to remember that part. Done in love. If that doesn't work, we take 1 or 2 witnesses along with us. Again, we've got to do it in love. If that doesn't work, we take them to the board. Again, in love. If that doesn't work, we bring them before the church. Again, in love. And if that doesn't work, we remove them from the fellowship. But again, in love. Church discipline is difficult. There's a lot of feelings that get involved when we have to use church discipline. A lot of times there's anger. There's hurt feelings. There's disappointment. But no matter what feelings we have to deal with, it must be done if necessary. Jesus knew that we would all, at one point, mess up. We would all, at one point, sin. Sometimes we may not even realize it and continue to do it. Knowing that, Jesus knew that there had to be a way to bring a believer back into the right. There had to be a way to do it in love and with forgiveness. So He gave us these instructions that we've looked at this morning on His church discipline. Do you know somebody that's in this situation? Do you know somebody that you're angry with? You're upset with? They've sinned? If you do, Jesus said go one-on-one. Don't go tell everybody else, go one-on-one. Then take 1 to 2 witnesses along if that didn't get their attention. If that didn't get their attention, take them to the board. And let the board take them before the church. And if that don't get their attention, Jesus said remove them from the fellowship. But skipping any of the steps that Jesus gave us for church discipline is disobedience. And guess what? That's a sin too. We need to remember to follow every command that Jesus ever gave, including the forgotten doctrine of the 21st century church discipline.